Fernando Alonso has experienced heartbreak and disappointment at almost every turn in his Formula One career. The two-time world champion has lost races by the narrowest of margins and a world championship by a single point. But when you see what he experienced during this Grand Prix in 2016, those other moments rapidly pale in comparison. It was the day that teams, drivers and fans around the world had waited for. The first Grand Prix of the year. But this decorated driver's dream day quickly turned into an unforgettable nightmare. This is the day Fernando Alonso almost died.
Massive accident. Welcome along, it's the opening race of the season.
The Australian Grand Prix was set to be the opening race of the 2016 season, and from Thursday, the paddock was full of the usual back-to-school vibes from teams excited to get back to work. Alonso was preparing for the second year of his return to McLaren, and everyone in the team was anxious to improve the dismal start that the Woking-based squad had suffered in the new turbo hybrid era. If only he knew what he was about to experience. The Spaniard had a busy but typical lead-up to the race weekend, taking part in media experiences on Thursday and completing all 3 practice sessions on Friday and Saturday. After practice, it was already clear that Ron Dennis's McLaren team had made some improvements over the winter break, but was still a long way off the front of the field, finishing at least a full second off in each session. Still, they were optimistic that they were progressing at a nice pace. McLaren entered into a works deal with Honda, with the Japanese automotive giant agreeing to build their 1.6L turbo hybrid power unit, and the F1 team was rebranded as McLaren Honda as a result. This was a deal that was the brainchild of Ron Dennis, who believed that
a Formula One team must either build their own engines or be part of a works deal to win world championships.
With Mercedes, who were McLaren's engine supplier during the V8 era, now having their own factory team, being a customer team simply wasn't an option for Dennis. As a result, he decided to resurrect the Anglo-Japanese partnership that had brought the pair so much glory in the past, hoping that the new F1 rulebook would allow them to write their next chapter of success. Alonso's qualifying was definitely less dramatic than his race, but it wasn't all positive either. A new qualifying format was being introduced this weekend, which knocked drivers out more frequently than before. The aim was to introduce more excitement into what was previously a tedious part of the weekend. However, McLaren racing director Eric Boulier said,
"It is extra pressure for everybody, for the drivers and the team. It is true that we have to be very coordinated. We can't release the car or ask the drivers to do the lap time at the wrong time anymore. We have no flexibility."
However, the big change didn't bring any surprises for McLaren, who qualified around where they expected. Alonso and his teammate Jenson Button scraped through the first knockout round, and Alonso set McLaren's best time in Q2, with Button almost 2/10 behind after just 9 laps. Neither driver progressed into Q3, and Alonso and Button ended up 12th and 13th respectively, forced to watch on from the sidelines as their competitors fought it out for pole position. In the end, he qualified a staggering 1.5 seconds off the fastest lap set by the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton in Q2. But the lap that Hamilton took pole position with was over 2 seconds faster. Nico Rosberg was second, and third was taken by Sebastian Vettel in his Ferrari. But even the prancing horse was over 8/10 behind Mercedes, an early warning sign for the dominant year that was to follow for the Silver Arrows. But there were no signs for how Alonso's race was about to turn out. After qualifying, Alonso switched his focus to the Grand Prix the following day, oblivious to the events that were in store. What he did know was that his glitter of pre-season championship contention hope was dampened, and the reality was that he'd be facing another tough year of simply fighting for points. The gap to the front of the field was huge, and realistically, the season was already another write-off for the once dominant McLaren team. However, it wasn't all doom and gloom at McLaren, as it was still a significant improvement over the previous year. Jenson Button claimed that those inside the team were positively surprised about how close they were to Williams and Force India after the season's first qualifying session. Alonso appeared to be in fine form when he told the media that
the car was fantastic today, happy with the leap forward the team had made.
The car may have felt fantastic, but it was still incredibly slow. In terms of the Australian Grand Prix, Alonso would have to find extreme pace in his car, race his way daringly up the grid, and hope for a miracle if he wanted to get anywhere near the podium, something he hadn't done since finishing second in the Hungarian Grand Prix in 2014. When the clock struck 4 p.m. on Sunday, The cars set out on their formation lap for the season-opening Australian Grand Prix. The lights are out and Sebastian Vettel gets a fantastic start, instantly jumping both Mercedes and taking the lead of the Grand Prix. Raikkonen follows through, making it a Ferrari 1-2. And the Tifosi gets a dream start. Further back in the pack, Alonso is holding position in 11th, battling with the Renault of Jolyon Palmer and the two Force India cars through the tight first sector. Between lap 11 and lap 16, the front runners had all pitted and were fighting for the lead in a thrilling battle. However, just one lap later, the race would completely change. Fernando was having a relatively uneventful race and had made it to lap 17 without anything out of the ordinary. He was on the charge to make up positions during the pit cycle and found himself behind the slower Haas Ferrari of Esteban Gutierrez. On the run down to Albert Park's tricky turn 3, he was close enough to open his DRS and was gaining on Gutierrez at an alarming rate. The closing rate was so alarming, in fact, that Alonso got closer to the rear of the Haas unbelievably quickly. Much quicker than he'd anticipated. His overtaking maneuver began while traveling at a staggering 313 kph. But before he knew it, his race literally turned upside down. As Alonso judged his overtake, he pulled to the left of the track to get alongside and pass Gutierrez. And his front right wheel clipped the rear left of the Haas in a matter of seconds. The McLaren hit the wall at an insane speed, turned onto its side, violently dug into the gravel. Before the collision with Gutierrez, Fernando managed to shave 8 kph off his speed, slowing his car to 305 kph at the point of impact. The pair made contact and Alonso's suspension collapsed, and his McLaren twisted onto its side in the process at an extremely awkward angle and came to a rest, with Alonso completely disorientated. The car's front left corner took the biggest blow, which, thanks to newly implemented sensors by the FIA, was able to be read at a staggering peak lateral deceleration level of 45G. That's equivalent of going from 100 km per hour to 0 in just 0.06 seconds. His head also took big hits in the impact. The high-speed cameras picked up that his helmet smashed the inside of the headrest twice during this initial contact, which explained the spikes in the ear accelerometer figures. The MP431 then bounced off the wall and skated over the short grass runoff area into the gravel trap, which started the more spectacular sequence of events during the entire crash. In an unusual manner, due to 3 of 4 wheels of the car already being torn off, it dug into the gravel trap, which caused the car to instantly pitch onto its side and into the air. His McLaren went 1G higher this time and recorded a peak lateral deceleration level of 46 Gs. It flew spectacularly over most of the gravel trap, with the nearest trackside cameraman showcasing his skills and reflexes by capturing the outrageous moment perfectly, even at such incredibly high speed and short notice. While in the air, it rotated 1.5 times through 540 degrees, spending approximately 0.9 seconds airborne, about the same length of time that separated the leading Mercedes from the leading Ferrari in qualifying. When it eventually landed after what must have seemed like an eternity for the two-time world champion, the impact was severe. 20 G of peak longitudinal acceleration was registered when the rear impact absorbing structure crashed into the gravel trap. The rear bounced off the ground in one final blow before coming to rest on its side, just beside the tyre barrier. In the meantime, Gutierrez suffered a far less severe end to his race, with his damaged Haas spinning into the gravel and becoming beached. As onlookers held their breath, he was heard asking his engineer over the radio,
"Is he okay?"
after seeing the carnage that unfolded for Alonso with his very own eyes. Viewers' first reaction was to fear the worst, as this was a crash completely unlike any other in modern Formula 1. However, moments later, Alonso was seen climbing from the ruins of his grey McLaren that had almost trapped him against the wall. This type of incident rarely occurs, but the recent horror crash of Zhou Guanyu at Silverstone in 2022, where the rookie's car ended up sideways between a barrier and a fence, had harrowing similarities. However, Alonso came off a lot worse. After finding a way out of the wreck on his own accord, Alonso stumbled through the gravel trap, looking back at the remnants of his race car in absolute disbelief. Gutierrez was quick to check on his condition again, and by this point the race had already been red flagged, which really wasn't as common back then, with other drivers ordered to return to the pit lane instantly. A pair of medical cars were deployed and arrived on the scene briskly, taking the two drivers back to the track's medical center for evaluation. As the marshals cleared up the debris, it became even more apparent how colossal of a crash this truly was, when Alonso's McLaren was pushed over to stand the correct way up. It was difficult to see the resemblance between its crumpled rear end and an intact Formula One car, and every single panel on the car withstood a brutal amount of damage. The cleanup and track repair process was lengthy, but the race finally got going again. The red flag causing incident turned out to alter the race result too, as it caused Ferrari to make an error in their pit stop strategy and hand the lead to Nico Rosberg. The German ultimately won the race for Mercedes, with Lewis Hamilton taking silver and Sebastian Vettel rounding off the podium for the Scuderia. The crash was deemed a racing incident by the stewards, with neither driver or team having to suffer any more damage than they had already endured. In the media pen after the race, Alonso admitted that,
I'm lucky to be here and thankful to be here.
He went on to say,
I am aware that today I spent some of the luck remaining in life. I want to thank McLaren and the FIA for the safety of this car. I am alive thanks to the job of the last 10-15 years in Formula One.
He also delivered an all-time classic quote in true Alonso fashion.
I was flying, so you see the sky, then the ground, then the sky, then the ground. You want to stop, but it doesn't stop. It keeps going and going and going. It was quite scary, but at the last moment, the car stopped, and I had a little space to go out, and I said, I will go out quickly because my mother will be watching at home.
In the weeks and months after the race, the FIA and Formula One used the findings from this near-horror crash to work on safety improvements to the series and motorsports in general. Laurent Mekies, who at the time was the FIA Global Institute's General Manager of Research, wanted to use it to help understand drivers' health before, during and after serious crashes, and aimed to attach a device to a driver's test before the end of the 2016 season. He said,
biometric data will help us to assess the driver's conditions before, at the time of the crash, and after the crash, as far as the rescue operations are concerned.
More high-speed cameras were also introduced as a result to obtain more footage of drivers' situations in future incidents. Finally, just under a year later in January 2017, the FIA simulated the crash with the Halo device, which at the time was still in development. Mekies was involved extensively again, and said that drivers' extraction times were tested in similar incidents with a halo attached to their cockpit. The halo was introduced at the beginning of the 2018 season, with crashes like Alonso's Melbourne moment paramount in developing the final product. Alonso admitted he was lucky to be alive after what was one of the biggest hits of his entire career. He escaped with just one broken rib and a condition called pneumothorax, or a partially collapsed lung to put it simply, where air exists in the space between the lungs and the chest wall. As such, he missed the following race in Bahrain, providing an opportunity for the 2015 GP2 Series champion and exciting upcoming star, Stoffel Vandoorne, to substitute and make his Formula One debut. He impressed, finishing 10th and scoring McLaren's first point of the season. However, Alonso fully recovered from all of his injuries just weeks after his crash and was fit to jump back into the cockpit for round 3 in China. The crash goes down as one of the most shocking, violent, and memorable crashes in Formula One history. It's fair to say that the continuous push for safety improvements in Formula One paid off, with their results on full display on the 20th of March 2016. This is remembered as one of the scariest crashes in F1 history, but I also made a video on the scariest race in F1 history, so click here to watch it now. See you all there.